Hey, what's up? Welcome to my channel. My name is Kylie if you're new, and today, yes indeed, today I'm going to be reviewing the 1978 classic slasher film Halloween. So today's video is actually going to be the first in my Halloween series, so every Monday from here on out I will be reviewing all the Halloween movies. I recently did this with the Friday the 13th franchise, and that's actually still happening. Those videos are still going to be coming out on Fridays for a little bit, but I knew I needed to transition into another series, so I'm choosing Halloween. I was going to do Nightmare on Elm Street. I think I'll do that next, but I'm choosing Halloween because I rewatched it recently. It's on Shudder and it's one of my favorites. I couldn't wait to talk about it. Also, I did talk about it a little bit in my top 10 horror theme songs video if you saw that last week, so I just thought it was appropriate. If you're new to horror or you're new to my channel or whatever and you aren't really aware of Halloween and what it did, what it is, why it's so iconic, the plot or whatever, I'll get into all that right now. So it was written, directed, and the score was done by John Carpenter and his wife. This movie introduced the actress Jamie Lee Curtis to Hollywood, and it's rated at a 96%. 15 years after murdering his sister on Halloween night in 1963, Michael Myers escapes from a mental hospital and returns to the small town of Haddonfield, Illinois to kill again. So I will get into some fun facts and then I'll get into my opinions about the movie. From a budget of just $300,000, this movie went on in 1978 to gross $47 million at the box office, and today the rough equivalent to how much money that would be is over $150 million. So this made Halloween one of the most successful independent horror films of all time. Actually, not just independent horror film, one of the most successful independent films of all time, period. Also, half of that $300,000 was spent on Panavision cameras to make the movie look the best it possibly could. Now, I've mentioned this in some of my Friday the 13th reviews that those movies don't look good because they just simply did not allocate the budget correctly. John Carpenter allocated the budget correctly and made this movie look good, and because of that, this movie will have longevity. Not to say that Friday the 13th doesn't, but that's a very niche community, and Halloween I think will live on far longer than that simply because it looks better. In today's day and age, our cell phones can shoot in 4K. So if your movie looks like doo-doo, people are not going to be as interested in it, and that's why I think Halloween will have a longer lifespan than other movies like Friday the 13th. John Carpenter also considers hiring Jamie Lee Curtis as the ultimate tribute to Alfred Hitchcock, who made her mother famous from Psycho. And if you saw my video last week about my top 10 horror theme songs, you would know that John Carpenter was also inspired by Bernard Herrmann, who wrote the score of Psycho. Now, going back to Friday the 13th, I have talked about why slashers are problematic and the way that they victimize people who, you know, are just open with their sexuality. Anyone that has sex dies, essentially, and so you might think that I would also find it problematic for this movie because I'm very outspoken about that, but I'm actually not, and here is why. So I'm gonna read this off of the IMDb trivia page. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill have stated many times over the years that they did not consciously set out to depict virginity as a way of defeating a rampaging killer. The reason why the horny teens all die is simply that they are so preoccupied with getting laid that they don't notice there is a killer at large. On the other hand, Laurie Strode spends a lot of time on her own and is therefore more alert. So it does make sense. There might have been other ways for these teenagers to be distracted, but let's face it, teenagers are very horny, and so it just made sense for this movie. But because it did define the slasher genre so much, other people that made slashers just kind of took the whole sexuality thing and ran with it and made it a lot more problematic than it needed to be. So this film, like basically any other movie, was also shot out of sequence, and so John Carpenter has had a physical fear meter to show Jamie Lee Curtis just how terrified she should be acting. I haven't heard of another director doing that before. I found it very interesting because, of course, as the movie goes on, you want your actors, whatever, to be gradually more terrified. But when you shoot out of order, that's pretty hard to accomplish, especially with horror movies, so I thought that was so interesting, a really good idea. Alright, and my last fun fact kind of helps me segue into my review. So my last fun fact is that John Carpenter's intent with the character of Michael Myers was that he never wanted the audience to feel like they related to him, but I feel like his words are kind of contradicting his actions, so I'm going to segue right into my review, because in the very beginning of the movie, we take on the perspective of Michael. The camera lens is shooting through his mask, and when you are taking on the gaze of the killer and your perspective is when you're watching the movie, you're forced to identify with him. Because right as it starts, he's murdering his topless sister. And because you're looking through his eyes, you're forced to take that male gaze perspective because she's topless. It's the male gaze perspective. And I found that form of cinematography to be very interesting. I did like it, but when you're forced to identify with the killer and take his perspective, that just implies really weird stuff, and it's obviously not catered to me as a woman because I was watching another woman with her boobs out just being objectified and murdered at the same time. So that was weird. But that was really the only instance where I feel like he contradicted himself. I feel like everything else was a lot more moderate than that first kill. And I can understand it because it's the very opening of your film. You want to do something very shocking, and this was very shocking at the time. Actually, well, okay, the character of Lori, I feel like the costuming also really perpetuates the idea of virginity being something that can keep you safe. And what I mean is all of her friends are dressed like normal teenagers, and Lori does not have an inch of skin showing, only her hands and her face. So that's a little bit consistent with what he was saying, and maybe he didn't have a ton of say in the costuming, but you're the writer and the director, so... Alright, let's get into some different topics. I want to talk about Michael Myers. Now, I don't want to get too deep into Michael Myers because I feel like I need to do a video that's discussing Michael versus Jason. They're very similar, but obviously very different. And I haven't seen any of the Halloween sequels aside from the 2018 sequel. So I need to do a little bit more research before I make that video, but just Michael, wow. Couple different factors that make Michael so terrifying. One, the breathing. I think that coupled with the fact that he never has dialogue and you never see his face, all you know is that he's just this living, breathing killing machine, and that's really the only purpose he serves, is quite terrifying. Also, he doesn't run, he walks. When Lori is screaming, running around the neighborhood, and he is just walking deliberately after her, not even a fast walk. He's just walking because he knows he's gonna get to her eventually. That is terrifying. That reminds me of It Follows, because in It Follows, the it only ever walks. It never runs, but it's always walking. It's always coming at you. The third thing is his indestructibility. Wow. That is also coupled with the fourth factor that he is never explained, and we basically just assume that he's a regular human. He's just a human. He doesn't have any supernatural powers. I mean, you might question that given that he survived being shot multiple times and falling off a balcony. But no, I feel like we're just allowed to basically assume that he's just a human, an unstoppable killing machine human. Also, I love the mask. I love how stern and emotionless it is, and also the fact that it's remained basically unchanged for 40 years. I love it. Gotta love consistency. Another thing that's so terrifying about Michael is he kills with no prejudice. He kills with no rhyme or reason, and that makes a killer infinitely more terrifying than when you know why they are killing people, because at least if you know why, you can possibly make it stop. But the only way to stop Michael is by killing him, and that is also apparently impossible. So he's obviously one of the most iconic figures in history for a reason. I love Michael. Okay, now let's talk about the characters in this movie. So this movie mainly focuses on Lori, obviously, and then we also spend quite a bit of time with a lot of her friends because, you know, they get butchered. But I think what sets this movie apart from a lot of other slashers is that a lot of her friends are dynamic. They have emotions, and some of them have backstories, and they're interesting. You actually have a little bit of vested emotion in them. So to me, that makes it more frightening when they die. I don't like it when other slashers just have these completely empty-headed and useless characters that are literally just there to be killed, because I don't care. Like, I know that they were just there to serve that purpose, but in Halloween, they were killed after we had formed some kind of connection, however slight, with them. But I had a connection with all of her friends. They felt very realistic. The acting was phenomenal in this movie, which in a lot of slashers, it's terrible. So whenever I watch it, I'm pretty emotionally invested in Halloween. And that's regardless of however cheesy or bad the practical effects might have been, which they weren't. They were pretty good considering it came out in 1978. So regardless of that, even if it's not top-notch special effects or whatever, I still was frightened and still had a very emotional attachment, essentially, I guess, to these characters in this movie. Also, I know I talked about the cinematography earlier with the taking perspective of Michael, but the cinematography in this movie is just excellent. Like, not just in that opening scene, the whole movie, it looks so good. One of my favorite shots is when Michael is stalking the little boy that Laurie babysits, and we have like a shot of him, but his head is cut off and he's just walking along like the fence at the school. I don't know exactly what it is about that scene. I feel like it makes the little boy look smaller because you have this wide shot and you can see the little boy in the distance, and then Michael is there like in the foreground, very present and very big, and his head's cut off, so it makes him look a lot bigger. So I love that shot. Also, obviously the scene where Laurie is sitting in class and there's the shot of him outside the window blinds. Beautiful. Also very creepy. And then let's not forget in the climax of the movie, the shots in the closet, amazingly love. And then also in that final showdown when Laurie is sitting by the door, or she's standing by the door, I'm not sure, and then Michael just sits up behind her with her in the foreground and then him back there, and like, you know he's gonna do it. Doesn't make it any less scary when it happens though, and just the cinematography I really love in this movie. It helps add a lot more layers to the story, and it definitely helps up the anxiety that you feel when watching the movie, depending on like where the focus is, what's in the background, where he is, like what's going on with the shot. I also really love Laurie Strode. I think that as a final girl, she's probably one of my favorites in any slasher that I've seen, aside from Scream. I mean, but Laurie's really smart, and it makes it a lot more interesting because one other fault of the Friday the 13th franchise is that their final girls tend to be really weak and just kind of dumb, and it's honestly just luck that they survived. But Laurie is actually very smart and very tough despite how disheveled she becomes. I mean, rightfully so. But in the moment, she's a survivor. So to give my overall thoughts, I love Halloween. I love this movie. I haven't seen any of the sequels aside from the 2018 one, like I mentioned, and I love that one as well. Okay, well, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. I hope that you enjoyed that review. Next week, I will be reviewing Halloween 2 that came out in 1981. I'm so excited. I have not watched it yet. So don't give me any spoilers, but definitely comment your opinions about my review down below, or your opinions about Halloween. I'd love to read them. Subscribe if you're new. I post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m, but if you hit that notification bell, you'll be notified whenever I post. I also have a vlog channel, and I post over there usually about once or twice a week. You can subscribe over there if you're interested in my personal life at all, or if you're interested in my travels or whatever, that's all over there. I hope that you enjoyed this review, and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!